For a lot of people, Okuruma's palace tends to be regarded as the worst in Persona 5 Royal. Honestly, I do not agree with this at all. While the boss fight was frustrating, and the music was annoying, it was certainly not the worst in the game. If you have leveled your baton pass correctly, and assigned the right moves to your party, it ends up becoming a more manageable fight. Not to mention, if you're really struggling hard, you can always up the difficulty to Merciless and abuse the weaknesses to come out ahead. What I'm about to tell you might come as a shock, but Shido's Palace is pure trash and simply the worst and most frustrating experience in Persona 5 Royal. Before I get into the why, the only redeemable quality this palace offers is that Arc is a wonderful track, and that makes this slog of a dungeon the least bit bearable. Let's begin. The Rat Maze is one of the most frustrating experiences I've had to deal with in this game. The layout of the dungeon is not clear-cut, and you spend hours going back and forth, point to point, trying to unlock the next section of doors. To add to this, you are surrounded by high-level shadows that have the potential to one-shot you and to start all over. This felt like the designers of the game just went for something tedious over innovative. I know it isn't really hard, but I have never been one to just enjoy useless tasks like this to help extend the duration of a dungeon. Not to mention, you are constantly being interrupted by encounters. Just let me solve the puzzle and move on. The palace is different than the other palaces in Persona 5 in that each ruler represented one of the 7 sins. Shido's just kind of felt like it was there. While it is cool that the diet building was on a cruise ship, and thematically Shido and his cronies are keeping dry while the world has completely sunk around him, it was sort of like they put it in just to make it tied to the sins having a 7th palace. While Shido is responsible for creating a lot of the problems Joker found himself in, he really isn't connected to the personal plot at the game's core. Let's not forget that you are also essentially going from point A to point B, talking to and then fighting politicians, which are nothing more than a minor blip in the scheme of the story. Just felt like I was going on a series of redundant fetch quests trying to get over the line to meeting Shido myself. Beyond irritating. Were it not for fighting Goro Akechi, learning about the true culprit, and seeing Akechi absolutely lose his mind, this would make this palace absolute garbage tier. Akechi really helped add another layer to this palace, and the story which was sorely needed. Finding out that he could use 2 personas like Joker, and that Shido was his father was that oh shit moment that we all needed to get through the palace. This felt like a very anticlimactic battle for me, since Shido ended up having 3 phases, and I felt the fight just wasn't balanced very well. The game expects you to survive 3 battles with 5 stages on one go. Shido, in the first stage, hits hard, and you can't really use physical since it is reflected back at you, so you're forced to burn SP. If you don't have any items or a Soma, you're in real trouble here. If you make it past his first form, you now get to deal with him abusing the weakness of everyone in your party. It is essential that you use your attack and defense debuffs to even stand a chance past this form. In this final stage, you are screaming for SP at this point, and without any debuffs you are just royally screwed. Every 1/3 of his health, he also gains an additional turn to use against you. You can now switch out party members, which would most certainly help. I also just want to point out that I couldn't stop thinking that he looked like a villain straight out of Dragon Ball Z, and it was a lackluster ending to his part of the story until we deal with Yaldabaoth and Maruki, who were both more infinitely intriguing than Shido, both from a story impact and a boss battle perspective. Now please note, this fight will be much less of a pain if you have a Ringda, so he ends up Titan Fisting himself and using Turunda to debuff. If you do those things, you should have no problem assuming you properly leveled yourself. This guy is such a stereotypical anime villain, and it felt so tropey with his character arc. It's not even something new original in gaming media. Persona 5 Royal did a lot of things right, and I get that they painted themselves into a corner with Shido, but after dealing with Maruki, who is arguably the GOAT villain in the Persona series, Shido feels nothing more than a little blip on the radar before you have your huge battles with Yaldabaoth and Maruki. As I mentioned earlier, for what is supposed to be a big build-up in finding out about Shido, the payoff is a whimper. I would even go as far as to saying Okumura was a better villain than Shido, and was more interesting since his daughter was in the Phantom Thieves. That concludes why I think Shidos Palace is the worst. I know it's of the popular opinion to hate Okamura, and that's fair, but the lengths this palace went to make me annoyed far outweighed any of the other palaces. If you disagree, feel free to let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.